The Medevac helicopter lifted off the coastal pad at 10 minutes past 6 in the morning, into a sky the color of a fresh start, and nobody watching would have guessed that 3 weeks earlier, no pilot in the county would touch it. Joel Callahan watched it go from the hangar doorway with a cup of coffee going cold in his hand. He was 41 years old, tall in the way of men who spend their lives bent over engines, and he had the particular stillness of someone who has learned that most storms pass if you stand quietly enough. Behind him, on the workbench, lay a maintenance logbook open to its newest page, and on that page, in careful blue ink, a return to service entry signed with his name. Through the glass of the ready room, if you looked, you could see a corner office with its nameplate off the door and cardboard boxes stacked on the desk. Next to the logbook on the bench sat a company envelope, thick as a paperback, with his name handwritten across the front by someone who had learned it late. The helicopter that no pilot would take up climbed out over the water like it had never been hurt at all. Before this story goes back to where it started, stay for one thing. The man drinking cold coffee in that doorway spent 4 months of his nights rebuilding that machine, and when he asked to be paid, he was told he would never see a dime. What his signature turned out to be worth is the part nobody saw coming. 5 months earlier, in the gray end of February, the same helicopter came home on the back of a flatbed truck. It arrived at the Lifeline Air Base with its tail boom strapped in a cradle and its skids bent up like the legs of something that had jumped from too high, which was close to the truth. A hard landing on a night approach. The kind pilots walk away from, and machines do not. The flight crews stood along the fence and watched it come in the way people watch a stretcher. Deacon Croft came out to meet the truck in a rain jacket with the company logo on the chest, and he was all warmth that day, the way certain men are warm when they need something. He was the general manager, and he owned a slice of the operation, and everyone on the base knew that the slice was the part of him that made decisions. The insurance settlement had come in low and slow, and a certified repair station wanted a number with a comma in it. He did not like, and so he called the one man. Everybody on the flight line kept mentioning. Joel listened to the offer standing under the wing of his rented corner of Gus Tremblay's hangar, 2 miles down the airfield, phone pinched between shoulder and ear, hands busy cleaning a fuel nozzle. A full rebuild, off the books, until the insurance sorted itself out, paid on completion. A handshake number. "You know I'm good for it," Croft said, and laughed the laugh that closes deals. The number would clear the truck loan and cover the summer program Sadie had circled twice in marker on the kitchen calendar. That was most of why he said yes. The rest of why lived somewhere he did not take visitors. His days already had a shape, and the job folded itself around that shape rather than the other way around. Up at 6. Braids by 6:20. Done in the method he had learned frame by frame from a video, paused and repeated in a dark kitchen 4 years ago until his hands stopped feeling like borrowed tools. Sadie was 8, missing one tooth, and held strong opinions about which braid was for school and which was for weekends. He dropped her at 7:40 and was under an engine by 8. Gus Tremblay, who was 70 and had opinions the way the coast has weather, watched him bill his customers and despaired. "You bill like a man apologizing for knowing things," Gus told him more than once from the lawn chair he kept by the parts washer. Joel would shrug and say, "The money always came out fine," and Gus would look at the ceiling as if filing a complaint with management. The rebuild happened at night in the Lifeline hangar, after dinner and homework and the dishes. Sadie came with him 2 or 3 evenings a week and did her worksheets on a stool by the toolbox with headphones on, close enough to see, far enough to be safe, and the flight crews on late shift got used to the sight of them. Dana Iverson, the flight paramedic, started leaving a coffee on his bench when she passed through. Black, no sugar, no conversation required. The pilots learned his name and then started using it, which on a flight line is a form of citizenship. He worked the way some men pray, quietly, and every night. There is a rhythm to a rebuild that civilians never see, because it looks like nothing is happening for weeks, and then it looks like a miracle. And both impressions are wrong. The first month is all undoing. Panels off, fluid drained, the drivetrain opened up joint by joint, every part laid out on white shop towels in the order of its removal, photographed, tagged, and written down. Joel filled 40 pages of the logbook before he replaced a single component, and he would have told you that those 40 pages were the real work, because a machine cannot lie to a man who documents it, and neither can anyone who comes after. The night crews adopted him by degrees, the way crews do. First he was the freelance guy, then he was the guy who found the hairline crack in the cradle mount that 2 other shops had missed. Then Theo Merritt started bringing his dinner out to the hangar to eat on the spare stool, narrating his day to a man elbow deep in a transmission, and Joel realized he had accidentally acquired a base again. On the night Sadie came, Dana taught her the phonetic alphabet between worksheets, and Sadie began referring to herself as Sierra Charlie and correcting people who forgot. Piece by piece, the broken machine came apart and told him its story, and piece by piece, he answered it. New skids. The tail rotor gearbox replaced and shimmed to tolerances he checked 3 times, because twice is for people who trust luck. Every entry went into the logbook in blue ink, dated, detailed, torque values recorded like testimony. Midnight would come and he would carry Sadie to the truck asleep, boneless as laundry, and buckle her without waking her, and drive home with the radio off. To understand why he took a handshake from a man like Croft, you had to go further back than February. Joel had come to the same base at 25, a line mechanic with 2 years of technical college and an apprenticeship spent sweeping floors in exchange for engine time. The first week, a flight nurse corrected his coffee order, his posture, and his assumption that she would ever be impressed by him in that order. Her name was Erin Shaw. It took him 2 years to talk her into a date and the rest of his life to stop feeling lucky about it. They married when he was 27. She flew nights, and he kept the machines she flew in. And between them, they decided that this was a fair division of the fear. When he earned his inspector's authorization at 30, the certificate that let his signature put an aircraft back in the sky, Erin pinned it to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a strawberry and told the neighbors before he did. "You keep them flying," she said. "They bring people home. That's the whole deal." He believed her the way you believe the person who is better than you at being sure. Erin had the gift of certainty without hardness. She could hold a stranger's hand at 3,000 feet in weather and make the worst hour of their life feel supervised, and then come home and lose an argument to a crossword puzzle. On her days off, she would sit in the hangar on an overturned crate and read out loud to him while he worked. Novels, headlines, cereal boxes, it did not matter. And years later, he could still tell you which chapters of which books belonged to which engines. Sadie was born when he was 33, in the spring, and for 4 years, the 3 of them had the ordinary kind of happiness that nobody photographs enough. Pancakes on Sundays. A plastic pool in a yard that was mostly gravel. Aaron working nights and sleeping mornings, so that Sadie's first big word, whispered in the kitchen like a password, was quiet. The illness, when it came fast. It had a long name and a short timeline, and it did not negotiate. Erin flew her last shift in March and was gone by the end of May. The morning of her funeral, every vehicle on the base lined the taxiway, with light bars turning, and the procession drove between them at walking speed, and Joel held his daughter's hand in the back seat and understood that some kinds of respect can only be shown with silence and lights. He resigned that fall, not in anger. The flight line was simply full of her. Every hallway, every headset, every coffee pot, and he could not do careful work inside a museum of his own grief. Gus rented him the hangar corner for less than it was worth and never once asked how he was doing in a voice that required an answer, which was its own kind of medicine. Freelance hours fit the school run. The work was good. The years stacked up quietly. Then in February, a broken Medevac came home on a flatbed, and it was not just any airframe. It was the program Erin had flown for. Her crew photo still hung in the ready room, third from the left, laughing at something outside the frame. The first week of the rebuild, cleaning out the cabin, Joel found a copy of that same photo in a drawer of the medical console, curled at the corners. He looked at it for a long moment, then taped it inside the lid of his toolbox, where a man could see it without anyone seeing him look. He never told Croft why he took the job on a handshake. Some contracts are older than paper. By the middle of May, the ship was finished, and it was the best work of his life. And he knew it the way a carpenter knows a true corner without checking. The crews knew it too. Pilots find reasons to walk past good work. Ray Hutchins, the chief pilot, 22 years on the coast, and a face like weathered decking, ran one hand along the tailboom, nodded slowly, and walked away. From Hutchins, that was a speech with 3 encores. The logbook told the whole story in blue ink, every part number, every torque, every inspection, ending at the one line that remained blank, the return to service signature, which by regulation and by custom belonged to the inspector who had done the work. His line. He left it open and wrote the invoice instead, and printed it on real paper, because the number deserved better than an email. 4 months of nights. He carried it to the base on a Friday payday with a good pen in his shirt pocket, the way a man carries something finished. He should have paid attention to which cars were in the lot. Croft read the invoice standing in the middle of the hangar, in front of the assembled day shift, and something went across his face that was not surprise. It was arithmetic. He looked at the paper, and then at the mechanic who had handed it to him, alone out here on a freelance ticket with a kid and a truck loan, and the arithmetic finished, and he smiled. "Sue me for it," he said, loud enough for the whole hangar to hear, and dropped the invoice on the workbench. "You fixed a helicopter, pal. You didn't buy a piece of it. Consider it a donation." Nobody laughed with him. The silence had edges. There is a moment men like Croft count on. The moment when the person they have decided is small does the math on lawyers and rent and decides to be smaller. Croft watched Joel with real interest, waiting for it, almost friendly. And Joel thought about Sadie's calendar with the summer program circled twice, and about the number he had just watched die on the workbench, and about how loud a hangar gets when it is completely quiet. Then he folded the invoice once, slid it into his jacket, and picked up his toolbox. "The logbook's honest," he said. "Whatever you do with the bill, don't touch the logbook." He was almost to the door when it opened ahead of him. Ray Hutchins came out of the ready room with the maintenance log open across one forearm, reading it the way other men read a will. He set his headset on the counter with a click that carried, and he looked past Croft as if the man were a chair somebody had left in the wrong place. "Get him back," Hutchins said, "or get another pilot." Croft laughed. It came out alone and stayed that way. Joel walked to his truck through the pad lights and drove home under a low sky, and the invoice rode folded in his jacket pocket, and he did not unfold it for anyone, because a thing can be folded and still be true. The next 3 weeks taught him how expensive dignity is. Retail. The truck loan had 2 payments left, which is the exact wrong time for a payday to vanish. The kitchen table at midnight became a spreadsheet with a coffee mug on the corner. Numbers moved from one column to another and did not improve by traveling. The envelope for Sadie's summer program, filled out in her own careful handwriting, went back into the drawer unsent, and he told her they were just waiting on the right week, and she looked at him the way children look when they are deciding to pretend to believe you. 2 days later, she left a drawing on his pillow. A helicopter, in green crayon, with a big check mark on the side of it. "It's the one you fixed," she explained at breakfast, matter of fact. "I made it already paid for." He kept that drawing in the truck, over the visor, and did not talk about it. Croft, meanwhile, worked the problem like a man draining a pond. First came the phone call, friendly again, offering 40 cents on the dollar as a gesture of goodwill, cash this week. And all Joel had to do was sign a release with a confidentiality clause stapled to its back like a stinger. Joel read it twice in Croft's office with the fishing photos on the wall and set it down. "You're not buying my work at a discount," he said. "You're trying to buy my quiet. It isn't for sale." "Then it's worth exactly what I said it was worth," Croft said. "Nothing." Word went around the airfield after that, low and casual, the way poison prefers to move. Freelancers. You never know what you're getting. No shop behind him. Uncertified, probably. The men who repeated it mostly did not believe it. But a rumor does not need believers, only mouths. Gus heard it at the parts counter and came home spitting. Joel kept working. He had a boy's stubborn habit, learned from his father, and taught to no one on purpose. When they talk, tighten bolts. The costs kept arriving in sizes too small to complain about, which is how that kind of bill prefers to come. A customer down the coast postponed an engine job, apologetic on the phone, vague about why. The card he used at the parts house asked for a deposit it had never asked for before. He started doing his grocery run on Wednesdays, when the markdowns happened, and told Sadie the dented cans were pirate treasure, and she was 8 and merciful and let him believe she believed it. What he would not do was let any of it reach her at altitude where she lived. Homework still got checked. Braids still got braided. When her class had a Bring Your Parent Day, he went in his cleanest work shirt and taught 19 third graders how a helicopter's tail keeps it from spinning like a top, using a chair and a jar of pennies. And for a week afterward, Sadie reported that he was considered the best parent, an outcome he privately ranked above every certificate on his wall. The part that actually cost him sleep was the helicopter. Croft needed it flying to hold the hospital contract, and Croft could not use Joel's signature without paying for it. And so in the second week of June, a solution arrived, at the base wearing pressed khakis. An inspector from out of state, hired for a day rate, who walked around the ship for 50 minutes, pulled no panels, checked no torques, and signed the return to service over lunch. His pen spent more time on the aircraft than his hands did. Theo Merritt watched it happen. Theo was 29, the junior pilot, still new enough to say things out loud. He stood in the ready room door while the man signed, then went and found Hutchins, and what he said traveled the base by dinner time, because it was short and it was true. That guy inspected a helicopter the way I inspect a rental car. Something quiet happened to the base then, the kind of thing managers do not see because it does not appear on any dashboard. The paperwork stopped being believed. And on a flight line, paperwork is not paper. It is the agreement everyone makes to bet their lives together. On the Sunday after the rubber stamp, Joel brought Sadie to Gus's hangar and taught her to read a torque wrench, her 2 hands on the grip and his 1 hand under the head. Click. Because rent needs money. But dignity is a thing you hand down, and he intended for her to inherit some. Gus cornered him that week by the parts washer with a business card for an aviation attorney. "You'd win," Gus said. "Probably," Joel said. "And Sadie would eat lawyer bills for a year, while I did. That base doesn't need a lawsuit, Gus. It needs the ship safe. Those are different jobs." What he did instead was not dramatic, and he told no one. He assembled his records the way he assembled engines. Every photograph from the rebuild, every part serial, every torque log, the receipts, the text messages, and his own unsigned return-to-service entry, written out in full and dated, all of it organized, indexed, and boxed. Not a weapon. A record. He could not make the man pay. He could make the truth easy to find. He decided that was the better trade, and he put the box on the shelf above the workbench, label out, and went back to work. The truth, as it turned out, did not need finding. It got delivered. It started with Hutchins, the Monday after the rubber stamp signature, when the schedule posted the Medevac's return to duty. The chief pilot walked into Croft's office holding the logbook, and he did not raise his voice because men with 22 years on the coast do not need volume. The office door was open. The whole front hallway heard it. "I've flown 22 years on that man's signature," Hutchins said. "I won't fly 1 hour on the one you bought." Croft said something about certifications, about legality, about insubordination. Hutchins set the logbook on the desk, squared it to the edge like a man setting a headstone, and walked out. By Wednesday, every pilot on the roster had declined the aircraft, politely, individually, in writing. Theo said his version plainest, standing in the crew room with his coffee. "You didn't just stiff a mechanic, you stiffed the guy who taught our mechanics." The Medevac sat on the pad, gleaming, perfect, and grounded by unanimous consent of everyone who knew better. Flights that should have launched from the coast diverted from the city, 40 extra minutes over water. The hospital network noticed within a week, because hospitals count minutes for a living. Questions began arriving with letterheads on them. And on the last Thursday of June, a gray sedan nobody recognized parked in front of the operations building, and a woman in a plain dark suit got out, and the base got a lesson in the difference between an owner and an operator. Celeste Byrne was the chief executive of the group that owned Lifeline Air and 11 operations like it, and she had flown in coach alone without announcing herself, which told the crews most of what they needed to know. She was 44, unhurried, and she conducted her audit the way weather moves through, evenly, and into everything. She read dispatch records, she read the diversion logs, she read the hired inspector's 1-paragraph sign-off, and her face did not change. And then she read Joel Callahan's logbook 4 months of blue ink, and it changed then. She found Croft in his office in the afternoon and put the logbook and the invoice side by side on his desk. "Explain to me," she said, "why the best maintenance records I have seen in this company are attached to a bill we refuse to pay." Croft explained. It took him a while, and the longer it took, the smaller it got, and the word donation did not improve the room when it arrived. Byrne listened without interrupting, which experienced people know is the most dangerous thing a listener can do. Then she asked one question. Can he really be the only one who can put it back in the air? And Croft, who for once in his life told the truth at the wrong time, said that any inspector could sign it technically. Technically, Byrne repeated and looked out the window at the pad, where a perfect helicopter sat under a tarp of pilot refusal. "It seems your pilots are not technical men." She did not fire anyone that day. She booked a room in town and she waited, and the coast, which had been rehearsing all month, provided. The storm came in off the water on the last Friday of June, the kind of hard June blow that takes the tops off waves and puts them in the parking lot. At 1 a.m, the phone tree lit. A patient at the regional clinic up the coast, critical, needing transport to the city, and the backup aircraft, based an hour south, was down for scheduled maintenance, and the roads were the kind of story you read about afterward. The only ship in range was the Medevac, and the Medevac had no signature anyone would fly behind. Croft called Joel at 1:10. It rang through to voicemail, twice, 3 times, and there is a whole sermon in the fact that Joel slept through the number he did not know by heart. At 1:30, Dana Iverson called, and he woke for hers. She did not apologize for the hour and did not spend it on the invoice. She told him what was waiting at the clinic, and what the roads looked like, and what the backup situation was. And then she was quiet a second and said the only thing that mattered. "It's the kind of flight Aaron used to take." He was dressed before she finished the sentence. He carried Sadie across the yard, wrapped in her comforter, still asleep, and Gus met him at the farmhouse door in a bathrobe, like this was a thing they had rehearsed. And maybe, in the way of old men who notice everything, he had. "Go," Gus said, taking her the way you take something priceless and portable. "We'll make waffles if she wakes up." The wipers could not keep up on the airfield road. Twice he slowed to a crawl where the water ran over the pavement in sheets, and he thought about the roads between the clinic and the city, and drove on. The base at 2 a.m. was rained sideways through the pad lights, and every window in operations lit. Nobody met him with speeches. Hutchins was already in his flight suit, drinking coffee like it was a pre-flight item. Croft stood in the ready room doorway and started to say something, and Joel walked past him the way you walk past furniture, and put his toolbox down under the rotor and went to work. "I'm not here for you," he said, without turning around. "There's a patient at the far end of this. That's the whole reason." For 3 hours, while the storm leaned on the hangar doors, he inspected the aircraft he had rebuilt as if he had never met it. Panels off. Torque checks, one by one, against his own logs. The tail rotor gearbox. The flight controls. The places the day rate man had never touched. Sealed and verified and initialed. Hutchins came and stood at the edge of the light once, not supervising, witnessing, and Joel talked him through what he was checking and why, item by item, out loud, the old teaching habit surfacing on its own. And the chief pilot listened to all of it, with his coffee going cold, because this was the sound he had been refusing to fly without. Byrne arrived at some point, in jeans and a rain jacket, and stood at the back of the hangar, and watched for a long time, and said nothing to anyone. She had read the logbook. Now she was watching it get written. At 5:10, Joel opened the book to the line that had stood blank since May, and filled it in, unhurried, in blue ink, and signed it. The entry dried under the desk lamp while the crew walked out to the ship. His name, and the 2 letters after it, on the page they had told him was worth nothing. The Medevac lifted into the weather at 5:40, nose into the wind, and Joel stood on the pad in the rain and watched its lights go the way Aaron's cruise had gone 1,000 times, and Dana's voice came back over the base radio 20 minutes later with the words on board, and stable. And the storm kept howling, and it did not matter anymore. The patient was in the city by breakfast. The paperwork was honest. The ship had earned its name back, and so had the base. Byrne called the all hands for Monday morning. In the hangar, everyone, both shifts. She stood next to the workbench with no slides and no microphone, and on the bench sat a thick company envelope with a name handwritten on it. This company pays its debts, she said, all of them, starting with the oldest one in the room. The envelope held the invoice amount to the dollar, plus interest calculated from the Friday it had been refused, and a letter of engagement on group letterhead recognizing 4 months of documented work. She did not hand it to Joel. She handed it to Croft and stood there and waited, and the hangar understood before Croft did that the handing was the point. He crossed the concrete and gave Joel the envelope in front of every person who had been present in May. His apology was quiet and short and did not perform. The work was never the problem, he said. I thought you'd fold. I did fold, Joel said. The invoice. Once. Byrne read the rest into the record without theater. The hired sign-off, voided and reported. The Whisper campaign, named as what it was. Croft, relieved of operational authority and moved out of the building by Friday, kept on somewhere in the group's accounting office where his arithmetic could be supervised. It was not ruin. It was accuracy. The crews did not cheer because flight crews do not cheer indoors. Hutchins just walked to the bench, opened the logbook to the fresh signature, and left it open, the way you leave a church door. There was one more piece of accounting that never made the minutes. Byrne asked Joel, privately, whether he wanted the hired inspector pursued, the one who had signed a return to service over lunch, and Joel thought about it longer than she expected. Report the signature, he said finally. Leave the man his license if the board lets him keep it. Everybody's somebody's father. Byrne looked at him for a moment, the way she had looked at the logbook, like a document that kept being better than it had to be, and made a note, and that was the end of it. Sometime that week, Sadie's green crayon helicopter with the check mark on the side appeared taped inside the ready room window, facing out toward the pad. Nobody ever said who put it there. Dana smiled like a person with information. The money did what money does. The truck got paid off on a Tuesday without ceremony, and the summer program envelope came out of the drawer at last. And when he told Sadie it was time to mail it, she insisted on raising the little red flag on the mailbox herself, and stood guard until the carrier came, in case the mailbox folded too. They went for pancakes on a school night, which in the Callahan house was a holiday with syrup. Sadie, working a fork like a hanger tool, asked if the helicopter was happy now. It's doing its job, Joel said. That's a helicopter's kind of happy. She nodded, satisfied, and stole his bacon. The story got around the way stories do in a small industry, sanded smooth by retelling. A mechanic down south heard that the whole pilot roster had refused a governor's aircraft, which had never happened. A parts rep swore the storm flight had been the mechanic himself at the controls, which was better still. Joel corrected nobody. The true version was already more than he knew what to do with, and it kept arriving in small ways. A shop 2 counties over calling to ask his rate without asking for references, an envelope from the clinic up the coast with a card inside signed by people whose names he did not know. But the part he could not have bought back with any invoice happened more slowly in the weeks after. Every time he walked onto the base, and the flight line did not hurt to stand on. For 4 years, the place had been a museum of his grief. Now there was new work in it, and his name in the book, and people who nodded at him with both eyes. One evening he stopped in the ready room in front of the crew photo, 3rd from the left, Aaron laughing at something outside the frame. And he stood there a while, the way you stand at a gate rather than a grave. Byrne found him there. She had stayed on the coast longer than the audit needed, a fact the crews had begun to notice and file under interesting. She did not offer him anything or ask him for anything. She looked at the photo and asked who the nurse was, 3rd from the left, and he told her. All of it. The coffee order, the strawberry magnet, the taxiway lined with lights. She listened to the way she read logbooks, completely. It was the first time he had told the whole story out loud, and afterward he realized the telling had not cost him anything. It had returned something. Grief doesn't leave. Some days it just agrees to hold the flashlight while you work. The offer, when it finally came, was 1 page. Director of Maintenance for the coastal operation, written the way he would have written it himself. School run hours in the contract, in actual ink. His own bench. The freelance shop kept, because Gus without a tenant would be a public hazard. He read it at the kitchen table, and Sadie, doing homework across from him, asked if it was a good paper or a bad paper, and he said good, and she said, then sign it, you sign everything else. Gus took full credit. I raised his rent once, he told Dana at the parts counter. Built character. His first act as director was small and deliberate. He started a Tuesday class in the hangar, open to any mechanic on the coast, freelance or shop, where he walked through one system a week the way he had once been walked through them, and he paid for the coffee himself. Attendance doubled by the 3rd Tuesday. Theo came to everyone and took notes like a man studying for a life. And on Fridays, a gray sedan learned the road to the coastal base. Celeste Byrne developed a standing need to attend a walkthrough that no chief executive in the group's history had ever attended. And Joel developed a habit of having 2 coffees ready, and neither of them called it anything at all. It was not sudden. It was punctual. Every Friday, like a scheduled inspection, neither of them logged. Sadie, setting the table one Saturday morning, put out 3 plates without being asked, and looked at her father with one eyebrow up, 8 years old, going on air traffic control. And he laughed for the first time in a way that surprised him and did not correct the count. Which brings the story back to a morning in July, 10 minutes past 6, a sky the color of a fresh start. The Medevac lifted off the pad and climbed out over the water, steady as a promise, a patient's family already waiting at the far end of its route. In the hangar, the logbook lay open to a page of careful blue ink. The corner office had a new name on order for the door, somebody the pilots had picked. On the apron, a girl in weekend braids sat on a toolbox drinking chocolate milk, supervising the sunrise, and a gray sedan came up the airfield road carrying coffee for 3. Joel Callahan stood in the hangar doorway and watched his ship shrink into the light. Years ago, a flight nurse with strong opinions had explained his whole life to him in 3 sentences, and he had been keeping the agreement ever since, through everything, in blue ink. You keep them flying. They bring people home. He had signed his name to that a long time ago. The company had only just gotten around to paying for it. The hangar doors stood open to the light,